Hey, what's up, blue collar business owner? Welcome back to the Blue Collar Prosperity Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Maskill, where we focus on helping guide you to have a prosperous blue collar business. Today, we have with us Doug Thorpe. With over 30 years of experience supporting businesses of all sizes, Doug has dedicated his career to empowering leaders and owners to achieve their full potential. He has been instrumental in driving growth, fostering personal and professional development, and building high-performing teams. So that is Doug Thorpe. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for being here. What's going on today?
Hey, Paul, pleasure to be here, and thanks for this opportunity. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Likewise, we're going to dive into all sorts of good stuff, egos and why it kills so many businesses and mindset and leadership. But before we jump into all that, Doug, give our listeners that don't know you kind of a little insight into your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Well, like many people in the modern business world, my journey has had a number of stops along the way. I was a commissioned Army officer out of college, went in. I thought I wanted to make the military a career and changed my mind midway there and got out when my obligation was over. And of all things, I went into banking. I received an opportunity and an invite to come talk to a large regional bank that was headquartered in Houston. I interviewed, and 20 years later, I was thinking about another career change. But that experience in those 20 years at the bank is what has fueled a lot of my thinking about leadership and ownership of businesses, mindsets and attitudes and egos. And that's a lot of what we'll get into. But basically, after I took an early retirement out of banking, I went into the consulting world, did that for a number of years, did a couple of entrepreneurial startups, fought those wars. And then around 2008, when the big crash happened, I turned all my effort to coaching and advising people. And it started with career coaching. That turned into executive coaching. And now I do a blend of coaching and advisory work for business owners and leaders of teams of all sizes.
Awesome. What a journey. And we're going to get into that and all the things you've learned and all the things you help people to do. So we focus on the trades here, blue collar businesses. I know you've helped a lot of people in the space, whether they're looking to acquire business, build a team, get their egos out of the way. A lot of times business owners, that's the biggest thing, getting in their way. So let's start there. When we start this thing, we're so proud. It's our baby. Nobody can call it ugly. When they do, we get defensive. But unfortunately, that mindset, that attitude, that ego kills a lot of businesses. Let's dive into that. Why does it happen, and why is it so dangerous?
Well, I agree. And let me first start by reflecting on, I alluded to that in my 20 years in banking. What I discovered as I worked with our bank customers of all shapes and sizes, I started noticing this phenomenon, and it was very real, and it was measurable, it was tangible. And that is that somebody would come to us and say, I've got this idea. I want to start this business. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I think I want to do. And, we would do our thing and underwrite, and we might give them a line of credit or something to help them get going. And we start tracking and watching the business grow. And for the ones that were ultimately successful, they went through the first one or two stages. There's a lot of different theories about the stages of business. I've heard it described as startup, grow up, scale up, and then enterprise, and you can take whichever one of those models you like. But the point is, there is an inevitable evolution of the business. And if your idea really does catch fire and start making a presence in the market, the owner's going to have to grow with the business. And that's the rub. And as you alluded, the pride of creation that some founders have ultimately becomes their stumbling block. And I actually named it the paradox of success. You see this idea that is the baby you birthed, and now it starts turning into a real viable business. And maybe you're making million, 2 million, 3 million, and beyond topside revenue. with that comes growth and expansion that has to be addressed. And if the owner has a limited belief about what that ought to look like, that business is going to get stalled and capped, and good decisions to continue the growth may not happen because that owner founder is unwilling to make those decisions. And ultimately, the business gets left in the dust because the market moves on and those choices are not made. And the very thing that caused success now becomes the negative and causes the business to fail.
So let's go into that a little bit. I'm a big fan of the quote or the saying, what got you here won't get you there. Obviously, you're kind of alluding to the same concept of resistant to change, not making choices. What are some of like the most common things you see? So business doing $2-3 million, like, all right, y'all got to start doing things a little bit differently to get to the 5 to 8 to $10 million range. What are some of those things that they're not doing, resistant to doing, do too late?
Usually the first one has to do with the idea of maybe hiring and designating a general manager or an operations head, or even in some cases in blue collar, the notion of a field supervisor or project manager. The owner thinks, I'm the only one that knows how to do that. I'm the only one that knows how to get the crew deployed properly out in the field. Well, guess what? You might have just defined yourself as a one job operation, because if you don't have the bandwidth to spread yourself to other areas, and you're unwilling to delegate certain responsibilities, you have immediately placed a cap on the capacity in the business. And I run into a lot of the blue collar businesses that I'm involved with, acquisition, transition. And what we see is the owner is the chief estimator or the chief primary salesperson. The leads and projects only come through the owner. And again, when it's a one person, one mind resource, there's an immediate cap there, because why? There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much you can do. So it's that reluctance to hire a resource that can, literally in the moment, double the capacity of the business, if you think about simple math. So if you're the owner and you're doing sales and bidding, well, guess what? Go find an estimator and you keep doing the sales if that's what you like, but now hand all that over to the estimator. You can still reserve the right for final review on the bids before they go out. Sure, that's okay, but don't be doing the work to put the bid together. Get somebody else to do that for you.
So let's say they do that, and you and I have seen this a lot. They do it, they hire that person. 90 days later, they can't do it as well as I can. I'm getting rid of them. And then they do that again and again. And they get this kind of like vicious cycle, mindset, belief, whatever it is, of like, you know what? There's just nobody good out there. I'm the only one that can do this. And I guess this is, that's just the way it is. I hear that quote more than anything in the trades of, well, that's just the way it is. What do you tell those people?
Well, what I tell them is ultimately, and this may sound a little brutal, but it's like, all right, fine. You have created for yourself a lifestyle business. It'll never be bigger than X. Whatever you're taking out of the business right now is all you're ever going to take out of it. And if that's okay with you, then that's where you are. But that's a stated choice. However, if you're telling me really do business, then we need to start talking about some form of mindset shift. Why do you struggle accepting the work of somebody else? And, the famous phrase that goes with that is perfect is the enemy of good. And, good work an estimator can do can still get you a certain reliable margin in your projects. You can have a margin of profitability in a project with a good estimate. Is it a perfect estimate? Maybe not, but that gets real judgmental, and it's like, what's the real definition of a perfect estimate? Well, what is that? What does that look like? What does it have to be, quote, perfect?
That's yeah, and usually it's only perfect if they do it, right? And they can't measure it, they can't put a thing on it, they can't show you how it's done. It's just like, well, that's just because what I believe. So
Yeah.
you had alluded to a mindset shift. We know mindset is so important, but a lot of people don't really know what that means. They're like, what do you mean? Like, how do I actually shift my mindset? What, in your opinion, when you're working with these leaders, these operators, people buying businesses, people selling businesses, what does it mean to actually have the right mindset?
Well, I think it starts with the ability to really align your decision making with the thing that you say your goals may be. So I run into owners that say, "Well, we've had a good run. We've 2x'd our business every 2 years for the last 10 years. So this is a great run. We're on a roll." And it's like, okay, but you know, now is it hard? Do you feel like you've hit a plateau? And usually they say yes. And then you start asking the question, well, why did the chain break? If you had that 2x trend line, why did it stop? What broke? And then they do get into the like, well, I'm trying to do the same thing I've always done, and then you get into that. Well, what got you here won't get you there, and you need to start breaking that down. I What comes to mind as maybe as an example, I had a client once that was a home builder, and it was two partners. One of them, the way they had chosen to divide the labor, one of them was running the purchasing department and negotiating with vendors and suppliers and subs and all that. And the other was doing more of the contract and the finances and the banking and all that, which was not a bad division of the labor. But the company had grown up big enough that purchasing was really getting squeezed. Purchasing was behind. They were, stuff was getting delivered late. It was stalling jobs, et cetera. And so they called me in to try to take a look at what was going on. And the very long story short, it was totally in the mindset of the partner that was doing purchasing. He didn't want to give anything up. He wanted to touch every transaction, every little, he had an assistant purchasing person. She was smart, capable. She didn't know everything, no, but she had a capacity that had been built in, but he wasn't willing to bring on another one. And the ultimate bottom line on this is that he didn't like training. He hated dealing with employees to train them to do the work. So it was a really hardwired bias in his mind. And sadly, and I'm telling on me now, it took me a couple of months to dig that out of him and figure out that that was the real stumbling block. We went through a lot of other iterations of what was going on and why this couldn't work and why it wasn't working. And finally, we realized that it was his resistance to investing the time to train. And so we started talking about the idea of finding another person to actually run the purchasing department and just come in, take on the responsibility of building a team, because they were a big enough operation. They could have used 4 people in that purchasing group for the volume they had. And what the owner partner was lamenting was he didn't have any time for his family. He hadn't taken a vacation in years. And, he had all this personal pain going on. And I'm like, it's all self-inflicted, dude. You might as well, pardon me, this is very inappropriate in the modern world, but it might as well take a gun to your head. It's the same. That's what you're doing. You're committing suicide by 1,000 cuts, doing it this way. And I had to get real dramatic in that way to get his attention. And finally he said, yeah, you're right. That's what I've got to do. I've just got to bite the bullet and get over it.
Yeah, I mean it's so true, and I see a lot of times, and you mentioned at the very beginning, do your actions line up with your vision or your goals. A lot of times they don't really have vision or goals. They have like this dream world, and they just don't believe it's possible. They'll say, "Yeah," I hear "yeah," but all the time. Paul, yeah, but you don't understand. My business is different. This is different. I just can't do it. And to your point, a lot of times they don't want to train because maybe that's not how their personality is. A lot of times their mentality is still, if I'm going to sit there and show someone else do it, I'm just better off doing it myself. I'm just better off doing it myself. I don't have to train anybody. I don't have to worry about them showing up to work or doing it wrong or not doing it perfect, like all the things we said. And one of the things you mentioned, there's, and I know for those listeners out there familiar with EOS, they have this kind of saying, get it, want it, ability to do it. And you had kind of hit on that. Like he had a very capable person who gets it, wants it, has the ability to do it. We're just not empowering them. So I think that's a good kind of segue into actual leadership, because a lot of times, pretty much all the clients I work with, pretty much everybody in the trades and entrepreneurs in general, start out by being like the technician. They're the ones who are turning the wrench. They thought they could, they believed, they thought they knew they could do it better than where they were working before. I'm going to go out on my own. I can do this better. I can make more money. I can do all these things. Very rarely they're like, I'm a great leader. I'm going to go start a company. I'm a great technician. I'm going to go start a company. So somewhere in that journey, probably $1, $2, $3 million, like you said, where a lot of people get stuck, leadership has to start being put in place. We need leadership to guide us where we're going. And a lot of times it just doesn't happen. A lot of times we have the mentality of, well, that's their job. Just go do it. Go figure it out. When it comes to leadership, what are some of like the biggest things you see, whether good, bad, or ugly, that are happening in local companies, local businesses, small businesses, in the trades?
Well, great question. And let me start with a first kind of a baseline definition of the difference between management and leadership. It's a real simple phrase. Management is about process and leadership is about people. And where these founder technicians that you're talking about get stuck is they get focused on the process. And they might say, okay, well, I need 3 techs to grow this business. So I'm going to think about a way I want to book jobs and schedule jobs. And that's a little bit of a process. And maybe they invest in a CRM or some technology to help them do that. But that's all they do. It's a little bit of focus. And sadly, they don't often even have good process. It's just a seat of the pants thing. They might have a receptionist type person taking phone calls, and job tickets are done on sticky notes. Hey, go to Mary's house or go to Paul's house. Here's your next assignment. So there's even not a lot of process there. But the leadership thing kicks in when you start thinking about the people and really starting to engage, and going way out to the other extreme of this scale and what we're talking about. I know a plumber who owns a very nice plumbing company in Denver. And I've actually had him on my podcast because he's an amazing guy and he's done so much in the people realm. So he's got a couple of things going on. Number one, he equips all his techs with uniform shirts. They've adopted a baseball theme, so the work shirts look like baseball jerseys. And there's some styling that has to do with the company colors. And there's like a home jersey, away jersey, and a special event jersey, so there's a couple of different combinations that they get to have. But he enforces a standard of, I want you to show up in a clean work shirt on every job. Well, what does a plumber do? They go to their first job, they muck around, get stuff done, stuff splashes, stuff spills, and by the time the job's over, the shirt gets trashed. So what do they usually do? Jump in the truck, go to the next job, and they show up, and it's like, ugh, well, he's got a standard that he expects his guys to change shirts if you have to, have a couple of shirts in the truck. It's part of the deal. But what he's done, he's built a shtick. The name of the company is High Five Plumbing. And he encourages, and he incentivizes his techs to talk to the homeowner. When the job is done, they say, Mr. and Ms. Homeowner, are you happy with the work I've just done? Well, yeah, it's pretty good. That's pretty neat. Well, would you mind stepping out here in the front yard? Could I take a picture of us doing a high five if that works for you? Would you be willing to do that? Oh, yeah, sure. I can do that. Ha, ha, ha. That's fun. So they slap. Well, the incentive part is there's a contest every week for how many pictures a tech can bring back to the shop. So they're incentivized to make that engagement, make that connection with the homeowner, and guess what? Look good in their shirt while they're doing it, because that's part of the grading. But they get immediate gratification for playing the game and being a part of that. But in a bigger picture, he has a regular recurring meeting with his techs, and he encourages them to build personal vision boards about what's next in their life, what's important to you next. And he tells a story of he had a new tech that had just joined him and just came to this vision meeting for the first time, and they were explaining to him what this was all about. And he thought a minute and he said, well, my immediate vision is I want to have enough money to buy new bicycles for my two daughters. That's my thing. If I can get a bonus or work overtime or whatever, and that's my goal. And the owner says, man, when he told me that, I knew we could crush it, because he's got a whole list of opportunities of ways they can get these little spot bonuses and incentives. So sure enough, about 2 weeks in, the guy had plenty of spot incentives and bonuses that he was able to go buy those bikes for the girls. And he said, guess what? That guy was hooked on being an employee of my company, because he accomplished a big life goal, and he knew it was a big value to that tech.
It's funny because I know the owner of the company, Levi, with Hi-Fi Plumbing.
Yeah.
I've known him for a while, so it's a small world, but it is so true, because leadership is about people. And I hear and you hear so many people say, well, back in my day, we didn't have to care about people. You got paid to show up and do your job.
Yeah.
But it's different now. Like people want to be treated like people. They want to be valued. They want to be appreciated. They want to be recognized, and they want to work somewhere. You can make a lot of money in the trades. They want a place where they can call home, have a career. And when you can start to pull that stuff out of them, like you said, of like personal vision board, a lot of people are like, this is weird. Like, I'm just a plumber. But like that phrase, we need to kind of eliminate it, because you're more than just a plumber. You're very important to the success of this country and the livelihood of this country. And without plumbers, without electricians, without HVAC techs, people are going to be pretty miserable. So being able to really get connected going back to what we talked about, mindset of like, what are our goals as a business? What's our vision? Let's take that to our people that we're working. What's their personal goal? Do they want to pay off their car? Do they want to take their kid to Disney World? Do they want to buy a house? Whatever it is, how can we align that with the role they're working in our organization, and how can we help that? So for all the people that think this stuff's crazy and they say, back in my day, we didn't have to do this, and we just got paid to show up and work and be a plumber or be an electrician, what do you tell those people?
Well, I agree with what you said. I think the world is changing, and there is an opportunity. And with everything that's happening in social media and the way people rate service offerings, and I mean, you can be working your tail off every day to do the right thing, but all you got to have is one customer go sideways, and they jump out on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and they just blow you up, and your brand just takes huge hits, because people that are looking for those services, the first thing they do once they see a name, they go look at the reviews, right? And it's a new mindset that the market has about evaluating these service businesses, and owners of those businesses need to think about how you're going to protect yourself in that game. So going the little extra mile, working a little extra hard is the ultimate way to do that. And with service businesses, the very traditional complaint from most customers is, well, I called for an electrician, but they told me they're going to be there somewhere between 8 and 5 on Tuesday. Well, what's that? I got things to do. I have my own agenda. But the company that can say, no, we're going to be there by 9:30 on Tuesday morning, it may be 8 to 9:30. We'll give you that window, but if we're late, the first 30 minutes is free, or something like that, to really hit home on the reliability and credibility. And then, of course, if you're the company, you got to make that happen. You have to live up to your promise. But the companies that are doing that with good scheduling, good employee motivation, good employee engagement, they're crushing it. Their market share is growing, daily. Because why? The consumer says, "Man, you wouldn't believe the plumber I just met. You wouldn't believe the electrician I just met." If you need something done, and they're going to tell all their friends, everybody in the PTA and PTO, is going to know about it, and that's how you get your brand in a market.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, we need technicians who are excited to show up to work every day. So we got to make it a fun place to work, a growth opportunity to work, where we know they care, they know we care. So that way, because they're the ones talking to the customer, and if they're hating their job or they're miserable, the customer's going to have a bad experience. And to your point, like whenever we're looking for a service provider, we're either going to ask like our neighbors, friends, family, or we're going to go online and ask Google. Basically, Google's going to say, "Wow, they have 1,200 5-star reviews. They're top notch." So people don't know how good of a plumber we are, how good of an electrician we are. They know how we make them feel and how our technicians make them feel through that entire process. And then by process of elimination of how you do anything is how you do everything. It's like, well, they got to be great plumbers because they answered the phone, they showed up, were professional, wore clean uniform, talked to me like a human, didn't try to sell me anything. Like all the things, like they got to be good at plumbing. So as we start to wrap this up, Doug, we've talked about a lot of things: leadership, ego, mindset, hiring, all the things. But if we could take one thing away from this, so any listener out there within the next 24 hours, what's one thing they could do to start moving their business forward?
Well, I think it could start with the fundamental question. When you look at your business, do you feel stuck? Do you think you've kind of hit an invisible wall, or has the business plateaued? Is it earning, growing, developing at the pace and the rate you wanted it to? And if the answer is no, we're stuck, that's the giant waving red flag indicator that maybe you need to rethink your whole attitude about the business. And whether it's people, whether it's process, whether it's resources, maybe it's pricing, maybe it's pay rates, whatever. There are so many different elements that make up the business, and one of those pillars probably is crumbling around you, and you just haven't focused on it and realized it. So it's that notion of feeling stuck or plateaued is usually the red flag to really enforce the idea maybe you need to rethink your attitude about the business.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said, Doug, because a lot of times we have that feeling. We just never take time to like sit, think, journal, write about it, type it out, whatever, because it's always on to the next thing. Let's go put out the next fire. Let's keep going. So everybody out there, in the next 24 hours, if something doesn't feel right, take the time to really look in, look out, and figure out what's going on and causing that pain and uncertainty. Doug Thorpe, thanks again for coming on the show today, sharing your journey and providing actionable advice for all the blue-collar business owners out there as we continue our journey to prosperity. Before we sign off, though, Doug, where can our listeners go to keep in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is go to my website at dougthorpe.com. That's THORPE.com. I've got some resources there that are free to download. You can join my mail list, and we do blog posts and articles. I do have my own podcast called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm big on the theme of common sense. This is not rocket science. There's some good, straightforward ideas and things. And on that show, my guests and I, we talk about all those possibilities. So, and that show's available on all streaming services and also on YouTube.
Awesome. Love the common sense theme. Doug, thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
All right, Paul. Thank you.